From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sonia Gray. Tragedy turns political in Guatemala as politicians now call for resignations, saying more could have been done to prevent loss of life. Now, while nothing could have stopped the volcanic eruption, new information coming to light shows the Institute of Volcanology had issued warnings of an imminent eruption at 6 a.m. Sunday, several hours before the volcano eventually blew. A number of congressmen have called for the resignation of the head of the National Coordinator for Disaster Reduction, or CONRAD, Sergio Cabañas, saying he failed to warn about Sunday's deadly eruption. CONRAD says when they issued evacuation orders, they weren't heeded.
Many Guatemalans, we will not forget this. The public prosecutors cannot forget this. It is time for Guatemalan public prosecutors to be held accountable. That's how it works in the countries of the first, second, and third world. All across the world, you pay for your actions. You know? And I am telling you straightforward, what you did is enough to resign. I am telling you this as a human being. Resign. You are not suitable for the role.
And CONRAD has announced they are officially suspending the search for bodies. They say this is because the area is not safe and because they've passed the 72-hour time period stipulated for searches according to disaster protocols. The death toll stands at around 99, with almost 200 persons missing. According to the National Institute of Forensic Sciences, only 28 bodies have been identified so far. In the village of El Rodeo in Escuintla, the rescuers are using objects buried in homes to help identify bodies.
The bodies of an entire family were found by the rescuers in the area of Los Lotes, in the village of El Rodeo. Among them, 2 women and a child. A family member managed to enter the disaster area to identify the bodies.
Some of us survived thanks to God. He gave us a second chance. There's nothing to do but keep going forward, and I know God will continue to help us.
Any recovered object near the bodies helps to identify them. They are also being used to locate the homes themselves. Documents or photographs are also aiding in the identification process.
The bodies are of course carbonized due to the temperature. We try to collect information, documents and wallets and take them to the people that could identify them. Right now we are taking the photographs found here.
Tons of sand are being removed, uncovering volcanic waste where bodies haven't been recovered. It's difficult to say exactly how many victims there are.
The number of injured people increases constantly. There are a lot of children that suffer from burns or respiratory problems.
Time is running out to comply with search and rescue protocols. Responders work against the clock in areas that are reduced to rubble.
And emergency workers have continued to assist the survivors of the Fuego volcanic eruptions in Guatemala as the death toll climbs to almost 100 people. Our correspondent Ernesto Alvalos has more.
I am at the Alotenango Central Square, where the firefighters and rescue camps are located. Last night, the government announced the end of search and rescue operations in the affected areas. This morning, a woman has died from serious burn injuries in 80% of her body. The number of victims has climbed to more than 100. In many refugee camps, volunteers are assisting the survivors with psychological treatments in order to overcome this tragedy.
Thanks, Ernesto, for that report. In Peru, the National Congress suspended lawmaker Kenji Fujimori over corruption allegations along with 2 others from his party. Fujimori will face charges of alleged vote buying to prevent the dismissal of the former president, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, who resigned in March. However, the Congress lacked a quorum to dismiss him. The motion was raised by his sister and political rival Keiko Fujimori, who wanted to completely oust her brother. Sibling rivalry is strong as analysts say that Kenji and Keiko, children of the former president Alberto Fujimori, could even square off against each other in a presidential bid in 2021.
I want to tell my sister Keiko, congratulations. Here, you took my head. Today is being nauseating. The due process has not been respected. The Constitution has been violated. I leave feeling outraged, but with my head held high. Because, as I said when I gave my defense, I have a clear conscience. I am an honest person.
And our correspondent Jaime Herrera has more details on the suspensions.
The session of Congress that ended on Wednesday around midnight approved the suspension of lawmakers Kenji Fujimori, Guillermo Bocángel, and Bienvenido Ramirez. They're accused of bribery and influence peddling, allegedly used to buy votes in Congress and avoid the impeachment of former President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. It's said that the congressman negotiated the pardon of the former president Alberto Fujimori with Kuczynski. Congress has already sent the resolution to the National Jury of Elections so they can be replaced in Congress. After the decision, the Broad Front Party, El Nuevo Perú Party, and Peruanos por el Cambio Party condemned the hearings. They said while they agreed with fighting corruption, this resolution was not carried out in accordance with the law. They also explained some congressmen didn't have to vote because they were part of the commission that conducted the investigation. The Broad Front Party will present a no-confidence motion against the President of Congress, Luis Galarreta, accusing him of abusing his power. The Broad Front Party will also ask for another vote on the suspension.
We thank Jaime Herrera for that report. Now in Nicaragua, President Daniel Ortega and a delegation of Catholic bishops are set to meet Thursday to discuss the resumption of the talks mediated by the Church to put an end to the political crisis in the country. The announcement was made by the Nicaraguan Episcopal Conference in a public statement in which it said that the goal is to find a way to restart the national dialogue in order to bring back justice and peace to Nicaragua. Anti-government protests against Ortega's government began in April, triggering a wave of violence in the streets that continues today. And the Colombian Congress has approved an anti-corruption popular referendum in an initiative that seeks to punish politicians who are involved in the mismanagement of state funds. According to the Comptroller's Office, corruption costs taxpayers close to $18 million a year.
Senator Claudia Lopez, a promoter of the anti-corruption referendum, explained the importance of taking this initiative to the polls since it seeks to end the embezzlement of public funds. The Senate approved the referendum with 84 votes in favor and 0 against.
They are stealing 50 billion pesos a year. That is 20% of the national budget of Colombia. 5% of the gross domestic product remains in the hands of corrupt politicians and authorities.
The anti-corruption referendum will consist on 7 questions, among them the reduction by half of the salaries of congressmen, public hearings to follow up on the use of public budget, and to eliminate the legal benefits to those convicted of corruption. The senators who voted in favor said that corruption is leaving more victims than the armed conflict.
There are disastrous levels of corruption. 50 billion pesos kills children in Colombia, kills young people that have no opportunities. Today, corruption kills more people than the armed conflict.
This is removing the possibility of education and health for the people that need it, and the possibility of having a job and improving living conditions.
Analysts have explained that political parties have illegally absorbed public funds.
The state is like a mechanism of political parties that dominate this country. There is an obvious conspiracy between the private sector and the state. We know that the justice system will do nothing to them, because it is also privatized.
The Ministry of Interior explained how the referendum would work.
The law states that following the Senate's decision, there are 8 days to call for the referendum, which has to be done within the next 3 months. The deadline would be September the 2nd.
One of the topics in the referendum is the possibility of canceling corrupt contracts and to demand that all politicians make their tax returns public and establish a maximum of 3 terms for employment in a public institution.
Time now for a short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Sexual abuse accusations continue to hit the Catholic Church in Latin America. Now a priest in Cuenca, Ecuador has been accused, shocking the community.
5 formal charges of rape have been filed with the prosecutor's office and the Archdiocese of Cuenca against Father Cesar Cordero Moscoso. All of the alleged victims are men in their 16th and say that the rapes occurred when they were children, allegations which until now were ignored.
Already at that time when the victims were young, he wasn't allowed to come near the children or teenagers. And he tried to find ways to do so, such as giving them a prize. We really didn't understand anything at the time. We decided to bring up the issue now because everything was covered up.
In a private declaration, Father Cordero affirmed his innocence and said that in situations of abuse, there is a certain complicity of the victims. In response, the Church of Cuenca has apologized via a statement where they highlighted that the Church of Cuenca has suspended Moscoso of his post as a public minister.
There will be a sanction. As Pope Francis says, people need to pay for their crimes. The Church can forgive, and it will forgive, but the responsibles need to pay for their crimes.
The story has shaken the Cuenca community, which has gathered on the streets to demand justice and action to ensure this kind of thing doesn't happen again.
The church is an institution that is supposed to teach you how to be happy. This affects more than just one person. It is affecting a whole town.
The prosecutor and the Catholic Church officials have said that full investigations are currently underway. Both promised justice. The church investigation was conducted by the Ecclesiastical Tribunal of the Archdiocese of Santiago de Chile, based on a 2010 Vatican rule. Meanwhile, relatives and victims await answers. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
A feminist protest under the banner "All to the Streets, Workers, Migrants, Students and Mothers" took place in the capital of Chile. Thousands attended the march to call on the government to listen to the demands of women's rights groups. They want women's rights to be enforced in a society that they consider sexist, unequal, and violent. They're also asking for education reform to teach children about sexuality, gender identity, and to prevent hate crimes against women and LGBTI communities. They say it is not enough to punish human rights violations and that it is necessary to educate the new generation.
We find it concerning that non-sexist education is not happening because today is not enough to punish violent acts. It's important to prevent them, and we can do that by changing the preset concepts of men and women.
I think feminism is something that helps us all. Men, women, homosexuals, transgender people. It's part of society's evolution.
In Costa Rica, the Public Workers Union announced they will go on strike this month to protest against President Carlos Alvarado's austerity measures. Workers gathered to analyze the economic measures proposed by the government, the fiscal deficit now reaching 6%, and how tax measures should be applied to avoid evasion by large companies.
In relation to the measures that the government is announcing, we are ready to fight back, to defend our rights, because there are legal violations and we won't allow them. We are also united with the working class and believe that this is a moment of definitive confrontation.
There are still topics that haven't been discussed: the exemptions, the evasion, the fiscal frauds carried by the richest. These topics are absent in the tax reform and in the austerity decree that they want to pass. The poorest, the working class, the ones who actually pay taxes, will be the ones that have to pay for the fiscal deficit as well.
Trade unionists in Paraguay are demonstrating to defend their right to retire. Workers are marching through the capital, Asunción, to reject a bill that would set up a new body to oversee pensions. They fear this may raise the retirement age and cut benefits. Schools were closed as teachers joined the protests. The bill has already been passed in the lower house of Congress and is awaiting approval by the Senate. And now to Brazil, where trade unions presented a series of proposals to put an end to the unemployment crisis and informal jobs. Among the 22 proposals, trade unions are asking for the removal of the labor reform and to reboost social investment. They want protections of their right to strike, improvements to the collective bargaining structure, reduction of the working day to 40 hours, and increase in the minimum wage. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights urged the Mexican government to reopen the investigation into the disappearance of the 43 students in Ayotzinapa that occurred 4 years ago. The body supports the decision made by the Mexican court to create a commission for research, truth, and justice to be joined by representatives of the victims, the National Commission of Human Rights, and the federal public prosecutor to dig into the case. According to the courts, the investigation carried out around the case was not prompt, nor effective, independent, or impartial. Members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus in the United States are calling for a commission into the deaths in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. Now, Maria hit the island on September 20th. The death count was relatively low in the days after the hurricane, but a recent Harvard study showed there could have been thousands more dead in the months afterwards. The Trump administration puts the official death toll at 64. The Hispanic Caucus says the Federal Emergency Management Agency may have responded inadequately based on artificially low numbers.
Funeral homes in Puerto Rico were all closed because they were tending to their families, because there was not electricity. We must go deeper. We need an analysis of how this low death count may have shaped the inadequate federal response. And this goes to the heart of the issue here. This is the argument, this is the narrative that defines the kind of response that Puerto Rico got from the federal administration, from this president.
Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness has been specially invited by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to attend the G7 summit on June 8th and 9th in Quebec. He is the first Jamaican Prime Minister to speak at the summit of the leaders of the 7 most developed countries in the world. According to Holness, the summit will focus on issues such as building resilient coasts and communities, sustainable ocean and fisheries. The leaders will also explore how best to address plastics in the oceans as well as illegal fishing. And Cuba's Deputy Foreign Minister Rogelio Sierra is on a working tour across Caribbean countries. His first stop was Trinidad and Tobago, where he met with the trade union leader David Abdullah, who's been a strong supporter of Cuba over the years. He also met with the Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States, June Soma, along with the Foreign Affairs Minister and the Minister of Trade to discuss economic trade with Trinidad and Tobago. Sierra heads to Suriname next. Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit criticized the opposition United Workers' Party for their stance on the use of marijuana, saying it lacks conviction. Skerrit, who supports the use of the now illegal herb for medical and religious purposes, has called for a wider debate on its use. The United Workers' Party, however, would like to secure Dominica's place in the global hemp industry, arguing that there is a demand for hemp-based products. Time now for another break, but join us again after another look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin has held his annual phone-in session with the general public. During the live broadcast conference, people from across the country have the chance to contact the president via telephone, text message, or the dedicated website. Putin responded to questions on a wide range of subjects, from Moscow's foreign policy to regional and local issues. On a question about U.S. sanctions on Russia, Putin said it was a mistaken approach.
As you can see, this is a way of restraining Russia, just as these notorious sanctions, because these endless allegations of wrongdoing form a base on which to enact restraining measures, as those who use these measures believe. Why do they do this? Because they see Russia as a threat. They see that Russia is becoming a competitor.
The European Union has announced it will impose tariffs on United States imports from the next month in retaliation to U.S. tariffs imposed on EU steel and aluminium. The EU Commission said it has challenged the U.S. tariffs at the World Trade Organization. The Commission also said that it has approved to impose the rebalancing tariffs on about $3.3 billion of U.S. imports, ranging from motorbikes to bourbon. The group also plans to impose tariffs on about $4.2 billion in 3 years' time.
Today, the college endorsed the decision to impose additional duties on the full list of the U.S. products notified to the World Trade Organization as part of the EU's response to the U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminium products. Following today's decision to apply additional duties to selected imports from the United States.
Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani has announced on Thursday a week-long ceasefire with the Taliban for the festival of Eid al-Fitr until the 20th of June. It is not clear if the Taliban has accepted it, although the president said operations against other militant groups, including the Islamic State, will continue. Since the beginning of the year, the government has been trying to cut a peace deal with the Taliban, but without any success. Instead, terror attacks in the country have increased since then.
Afghan National Defense and Security Forces will only stop the offensive maneuvers against Afghan armed Taliban and will continue to target Daesh and other foreign-backed terrorist organizations and their affiliates.
And we end with the news that the Brazilian Fernanda Colombo will be the first woman to participate as a referee in the FIFA World Cup. The head of the Brazilian Referee Commission, Antonio Ferreira, has handed over the FIFA credentials to include the 25-year-old referee to the World Cup tournament, making her the first. Colombo was recognized as one of the best sideline referees in the Brazilian First Division tournament. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you so much for watching.